Good morning, Bucknutters. Welcome to the Bucknuts Morning 5 here on Monday, October 5th, 2015. I am Dave Biddle, and I am joined by Steve Helwagen. Well, Steve, my man, this is certainly going to be an interesting Urban Meyer press conference later today. We will chat with Coach Meyer at about 11:45 a.m. today. Also going to chat with Luke Fickell and a handful of players. You know, this is a pretty broad question, Steve, but what is the biggest problem with this offense? It's a long list to choose from. What's the biggest problem with this offense as far as you can see?
Well, you know, I mean, they put up 517 yards, 511 yards the week before, and they scored 38 points in that game against Western Michigan. And they win this game against Indiana 34-27, and Indiana coming in defensively was not among the top leaders. In fact, they were at the bottom of the NCAA rankings in several categories, including next to last in passing yards allowed, 360. Cardale Jones did throw for 245. Ezekiel Elliott rushed for 274, which is the second most in a game in Ohio State history, and yet you're left scratching your head. What is wrong? And here's a perfect example, Dave. 2 of 14 on third down. 2 of 14 on third down. I mean, and they won a game, I think it was 2 weeks ago against Northern Illinois, where they were, I want to say, 2 of 10 that day. I mean, they are just not getting it done when they need to get it done. The red zone was a disaster for the Buckeyes in this game in the first half. When they ran plays inside the 20-yard line, they could not find the end zone with a search party. Some bad throws. Indiana did a great job against the run at times inside the red zone. And so, you know, you add it all up, and they stirred up all this dust. But honestly, when you allow Indiana to be in this game until the very last play, you never put them away after you get up by 14. You know, they got a lot of questions. They got a lot of issues. They got a lot of problems. But the two things I would come back to is red zone, play calling and execution, and the turnovers. Jalen Marshall, 2 fumbles, Cardale Jones, an interception. You know, again, you get into a game with a Michigan State or down the line, Baylor, TCU, whoever it is, you turn the ball over, you're going to lose. So, yeah, those are some of the things I think about. I don't know. You asked me about Cardale Jones, and I want to know what you think about Cardale Jones as well.
Well, I was going to say, Steve, one of the things about Cardale is during the Cardale era, we've had nothing but wins and a lot of turnovers. And they're not always his fault, of course. They're not. I mean, a lot of times they're not his fault, but sometimes they are his fault. And you know, I didn't think he played that terribly at Indiana. I mean, I didn't think, you know, a lot of people were like, oh, he should have been pulled. And I understand where they're coming from because at times he looked awful. He had a couple touchdown passes he should have thrown, but the guy only had 1 interception. Overall, I thought, you know, he was playing well at times, but, yeah, I understand where people are coming from. The question is, I mean, Urban Meyer just 2 weeks ago said he was going to stick with Cardale, and now we've had 2 games of, you know, kind of lackluster performance from Cardale. Do you feel like Urban Meyer is torn at this point? Do you feel like he is considering going back to J.T. Barrett? Just tell me how you feel about the Cardale Jones versus J.T. Barrett situation. I will say this, Steve. It is definitely dividing Buckeye Nation more and more each week.
It is. It is. The people who've been with Cardale all along are steadfast with him, and, you know, the people who'd like to see J.T., you know, are starting to come out of the woodwork. Let me start with Cardale Jones. I think Urban Meyer was a bit defensive after the game, looking at the stats and noticing that his quarterback completed 66% of his passes, 18 of 27, for 245 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. I think his numbers, kind of like the week before where he threw for a career high, 288, but it could have been 388 if he did hit on the plays he should have. I think you have the same situation. His numbers and the final result look much better if they get 2 touchdowns in that red zone instead of those 2 short field goals. And they were down in there another time and got backed out because of a penalty and negative play and missed a field goal. I mean, they had 4 times that they ran plays inside the 20-yard line and got 2 field goals out of it. I mean, that's just ridiculous. So the 3 throws that come back to me were Vanette. He threw it very hard. wide of him, it appeared to me. And I was taking pictures at that point. My vantage point wasn't that great, but I was still down there the next time where it looked like he threw it high to Michael Thomas off his fingertips, and then he threw a slant to Marshall, who was going to the ground, and either Marshall dropped it or it was just, again, he threw the fastball there when, maybe you just throw the circle change or something there, where you don't worry. I don't think you have to worry about gunning that pass in there, even though it's a tight window, because you're throwing it basically at his knees and expecting him to make a diving catch, and there isn't going to be anybody else down there. So, that's one you have to complete. He was wide open. Nobody around. You have to complete that throw. Either the quarterback or the receiver messed that up. I don't know if he was at fault in any of those three or all those three, whatever it was, but when I go back and rewatch this when I get a chance, I'm going to get to the bottom of it. But, people want J.T. Barrett, and I am still not of a mind that he's right. I just don't think that he is back where he was last year. But as a compromise, one of the questions I think Urban Meyer should answer is, if Cardale is not going to put the ball into the end zone in the red zone, why don't you devise a red zone package and use J.T. Barrett, who was amazing in the freaking red zone last year with the quarterback draw and the throws and anything else you wanted him to do, he did it. Maybe that's the thing. Use Cardale's big arm when you're out in the field and use JT's running ability, decision-making when you're inside the 20.
I'm glad you mentioned Zeke earlier in the show because everybody's focusing on the negative. You go to Indiana, you're on the brink of losing the game. Because they're not going to. It's not going into overtime. If they score that touchdown, they're either they're going for two and either winning or losing the game. So you're on the brink of losing the game at Indiana, but Zeke Elliott continues to just amaze. The second most rushing yards in Ohio State history, tying Keith Byers for the second most, 274 yards, only trailing Eddie George's 314 yards against Illinois in 1995 during Eddie George's Heisman season. Through the first four games, Steve, it was, what's wrong with Zeke? Has Zeke lost a step? What's different about Zeke? He didn't look the same. Well, I think the blocking wasn't very good. Zeke always looked good, and we saw that in spades against Indiana, and I feel really good for him. I feel like he was motivated a little bit, Steve, by all the questions about Leonard Fournette, Nick Chubb, Jordan Howard from Indiana. Good to see Ezekiel Elliott get himself right back in that Heisman race.
I agree. I think he is right back in the thick of it. You talk about, statistics and all these different things. I added it up last night after the game, and Elliott, I don't have the list in front of me, but he's got to be back among the national leaders in rushing when he's, coming off a 274-yard game. I know he increased his average per game by about 30 yards as a result of that, so that's a pretty good thing. But I would say it's Fournette 1 and Elliott 2 at this point, and the plays he made, 55, 65, 75-yard touchdowns. Jack Park said he didn't recall anybody ever having that kind of a second half or a half period in a game for Ohio State. So I'd say that's a pretty good source to go with that. But, Zeke, what they did in that second half, they really kind of simplified things. He rolled the dice on their own end. They were trailing. It was 4th and 1, and on the 65-yarder, they're on their own 35-yard line. They went for it, and obviously he broke through and got it. This game had so many things it reminded me of. It reminded me of them losing to Michigan State in 1998 when they were number 1, and it seemed a near impossibility that somebody could beat them, and it happened, and that nearly happened in this game. And then you think about the Indiana game back in 96 when they clinched the Rose Bowl there and kind of, had to trailed the whole day basically, and in the fourth quarter they pulled it out. Well, that's kind of what happened again. And last year's game with Indiana, Indiana was ahead in the third quarter. They were ahead in the third quarter again this time, and I would say last year's Indiana team had no business doing that at Ohio State, but this year's Indiana team, I think they have the possibility to win 7 games, maybe if they can beat Purdue and Rutgers and Maryland, who are still on their schedule. So a middle of the road, much better than normal Indiana team was what Ohio State faced, and man, did they expose some things that Ohio State's got to work on, no doubt about it.
No question about that. And switching gears before we end the show, real quick, Buckeyes get a 4-star recruit and lose a 4-star recruit in their 2017 class. They landed Brendan White, the number 22 safety in the country, number 312 overall player in the country in the 2017 class, according to 24/7 Sports Composite. Of course, the son of former Buckeye and NFL standout William White. However, they did lose Bruce Judson, number 16 athlete in the country, number 153 overall player in the country in the 2017 class. So, Steve, they get a 4-star, they lose a 4-star. Your thoughts?
Well, obviously, I'm old enough to remember William White. He played for the Buckeyes in the late 80s, and he's a Lima guy originally, and family lives up in Olentangy area up there. I think Liberty High School now, so is where Brendan goes. And everybody says that he is a great playmaker, could be a player for him on either side of the football, and they love that versatility with some of these guys. And we'll just wait and see how he turns out. But I think that a lot of people are excited about this. He got his offer a week or two ago, thought about it for just a little bit. I think it would have been almost an immediate thing, but I believe his dad, William, may have been out of town on business, so they had to wait a few days before he could finalize the commitment. So congratulations to him. We saw Judson at the Ohio State Friday Night Lights camp, I believe, and he's been around, and I don't know what to say. I mean, when he was in town, the things that I recalled him saying was he was Ohio State all the way, but for whatever reason, there's been some kind of disconnect, and he wants to maybe take a few visits elsewhere, or who knows what. But, it's a long way until he's going to have to sign, so I don't worry too much about it. And, if he ends up at Ohio State, that's great. If not, believe me, they have recruited enough great players the last 3 or 4 years that they can withstand losing one. And, we know that they've still got a lot of great players they need to get in on and get out there and get. But I think I don't worry too much about their recruiting at this point.
I'm with you on that. That's one thing I do not lose any sleep over is Urban Meyer's recruiting efforts at Ohio State. That is very well said. He is Steve Helwagen. I am Dave Biddle, and once again, it's going to be a very interesting Urban Meyer press conference today, 11:40 a.m. We will have full coverage on Bucknuts. We'll have Bolts stories and videos on what Coach Meyer has to say, and we will have Bolts stories and videos on what Luke Fickell and the players have to say. Thanks again to Steve Helwagen for his wisdom, and thanks to you for tuning into the show. I appreciate it. Hope you have a great day. Play that Buckeye swag, best damn band in the land.